All right, you bastards, welcome back to another deep dive.
Suck yeah.
Today we're going to wade into that dumpster fire known as Trumpism.
Oh, God.
We got excerpts from that Wikipedia article on this shit show. And believe me, it's a wild fucking ride.
Oh, I bet.
Before we start throwing around the word fuck every other word, let me introduce our expert for this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Let's unpack this political clusterfuck.
Okay.
So Trumpism, it's not just some random political ideology, is it?
No.
This shit seems to have spread like a goddamn virus.
You know, that's a pretty apt observation. Trumpism is a global phenomenon. It's like this weird political strain that has mutated and infected other countries. You see it in Brazil with Bolsonaro, Turkey with Erdogan. Even Canada's got a touch of it with that Poilievre fella.
Right.
It's this bizarre cocktail of national conservatism and national populism that's resonating with a very specific kind of pissed off voter.
Oh, I bet. So it's more than just wearing a red hat and screaming about fake news. What are some of the hallmarks of this political plague?
Think anti-immigrant sentiment, protectionism, isolationism. Basically America first, even if it means screwing everyone else over.
Yes.
They are very suspicious of global cooperation. And they favor unilateral action.
What's the deal with ditching allies like Canada and NATO? I mean, those are our buddies, right?
Yeah, but remember, Trumpism thrives on this us versus them mentality. It's all about rejecting globalism and going it alone, even if it pisses off your supposed friends.
Yeah, but doesn't that make more enemies than friends?
Apparently not.
All right? It's like they want to build a wall around America, both literally and figuratively. But what's with all the anger and resentment?
That's where the psychology of this whole thing gets really interesting. Trump tapped into this deep well of resentment, particularly among white working-class men who feel like they've been screwed over by the system.
Oh, yeah.
They're clinging to this idea of a lost golden age, fueled by nostalgia and a sense of aggrieved entitlement.
So they're basically a bunch of pissed-off dudes who feel like the world owes them something.
It's a little more nuanced than that.
Okay.
These folks are grappling with real anxieties about economic insecurity, changing social norms, and a perceived loss of status. And Trump weaponized those anxieties, pointing the finger at immigrants, liberals, and anyone he could paint as the enemy.
So we've got economic anxiety, this us versus them mentality, and a healthy dose of nostalgia for a better past. Is that the secret sauce of Trumpism?
It's definitely part of it, but there's also this whole masculinity thing tied in there.
Oh.
This idea that traditional masculinity is under attack, which really resonated with a certain segment of Trump's base.
So they're clinging to that John Wayne image of manhood while the world's changing around them.
Exactly. And the term toxic masculinity has become much more prevalent since Trump came on the scene. It's almost like his behavior and rhetoric have forced us to confront these harmful aspects of traditional manhood. It's like he embodies this aggressive, domineering, win-at-all-costs mentality that some people see as the epitome of manliness. But let's be real, it's just a bunch of bullshit.
Well, it's certainly a narrow and outdated view of masculinity.
For sure.
And it's interesting how this connects to the pandemic and vaccine resistance.
Yeah.
You know, refusing to wear a mask or get vaccinated became a weird badge of honor for some of these tough guys.
Oh, yeah. It's like they see following public health guidelines as a sign of weakness.
Exactly. It's this warped sense of individualism where personal freedom trumps collective responsibility. They see any form of authority, whether it's scientists, doctors, or the government, as a threat to their individual liberty.
Yeah.
And Trump, of course, exploited that sentiment for all it was worth.
Okay, so we've got the angry white dudes, the toxic masculinity, the rejection of experts and authority.
And let's not forget about the evangelicals. How the hell did this thrice-married, pussy-grabbing, casino-owning motherfucker manage to win over so many Christians? That's what I want to know. It's like they completely overlooked his moral bankruptcy and embraced him as some kind of God-sent savior. What the actual fuck?
It's one of the most baffling aspects of this whole phenomenon. You have evangelical leaders like Paula White and Robert Jeffress praising Trump as this chosen one, despite all evidence to the contrary.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder about the state of modern Christianity in America.
It's mind-blowing. Did they all just collectively drink the Kool-Aid?
It's more complex than that. Some scholars argue that Trump's appeal to evangelicals is rooted in this idea of American exceptionalism, this belief that America has a special destiny ordained by God. And they see Trump, despite all his flaws, as someone who can restore America to its rightful place as a righteous nation.
Okay, so they're willing to overlook his personal failings because they believe he's fulfilling a divine mission. Talk about cognitive dissonance.
It's a fascinating psychological and sociological phenomenon. And then you have the prosperity gospel, this idea that wealth and success are signs of God's favor, which aligns perfectly with Trump's image as a self-made billionaire.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's all a load of bullshit, right?
Right.
It's just a way to exploit people's faith and line their own pockets.
You're not wrong. It's a dangerous and manipulative ideology that often preys on the vulnerable. And when you mix that with political power, it can become downright toxic.
Yeah, it's like a match made in hell. The cynical manipulator and the faithful flock both using each other for their own gain.
It's a strange and unsettling alliance, and one that has had a profound impact on American politics.
All right, let's take a quick piss break and come back for part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into the twisted psyche of Trumpism.
We'll try to figure out how this motherfucker managed to convince so many people to buy into his bullshit.
Sounds good. All right, so back to this shit show. Let's try to figure out how this orange-tinted combover sporting motherfucker managed to persuade so many people to follow him. It's a real head-scratcher.
Right. Like, how do you convince a whole chunk of America that up is down, black is white? And tax cuts for billionaires are somehow good for the working class. It's mind-boggling. Well, you hit the nail on the head with that whole up is down thing. Trump is a master of twisting reality, creating his own version of the truth that appeals to his base's emotions, not their logic. He bypasses critical thinking by tapping into those raw, primal feelings of fear, anger, and resentment.
It's like that fucked up scene in 1984 where they're torturing the dude into believing 2 + 2 is 5.
Exactly. Trump understood the power of appealing to people's gut feelings. He gave them someone to blame for their problems. Immigrants, liberals, the deep state, and promised to fight for them even if it meant breaking all the rules. He positioned himself as the ultimate outsider, the only one who could drain the swamp and restore America to its former glory.
He basically weaponized their bullshit,
Yeah.
and it fucking worked.
Yeah.
But how do you explain all the lies? Didn't people see through that crap?
Trump's lies weren't just about misleading people. They were about creating a shared reality, a narrative that his supporters could buy into, even if it was demonstrably false. He understood that repeating a lie often enough makes it feel true, especially when it's amplified by a supportive media ecosystem.
So it's not just about believing the lies. It's about belonging to the group that believes the lies. It's like some fucked up social experiment.
It's a classic cult tactic. Create a sense of us versus them, demonize the outsiders, and then offer your followers a sense of belonging and purpose within the group. Throw in some catchy slogans, a few red hats, and you've got yourself a movement.
And all fueled by a constant stream of bullshit from right-wing media outlets like Fox News and Breitbart, right?
Exactly. These outlets function as echo chambers, reinforcing the Trumpian narrative and feeding the outrage machine. They create a closed loop where dissenting voices are silenced, facts are irrelevant, and emotions reign supreme.
It's like they've created an alternate reality where critical thinking is banished and blind loyalty is rewarded.
And social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter only make it worse. They're designed to keep you engaged. Even if it means feeding you a steady diet of misinformation and hate speech, their algorithms are optimized for outrage, not accuracy. And it's creating a deeply divided and polarized society.
So we're all trapped in this digital hellscape, being manipulated by algorithms and outrage merchants. This is some seriously fucked up shit.
It's a bleak picture, I'll admit. And the worst part is it's profitable. These media companies, these social media platforms, they're making a killing off our division and anger. They're incentivized to keep us addicted to outrage, regardless of the damage it does to our democracy.
It's like we're all just pawns in their game, being played for fools while they rake in the cash. It's enough to make you want to chuck your phone in the toilet and move to a remote island with no Wi-Fi.
I hear you. But even if we disconnect from the digital world, the underlying problems that fueled the rise of Trumpism won't magically disappear.
So what the fuck can we do? How do we fight back against this tidal wave of bullshit?
It's a tough question, but I think it starts with individual responsibility. We need to be critical consumers of information, question everything and demand evidence. We can't just blindly accept what we see on social media or hear on our favorite news channel. We need to be skeptical, discerning, and willing to challenge our own biases.
So basically, we need to become our own fact-checkers and bullshit detectors.
Exactly. Don't just accept things at face value. Do your own research, check multiple sources, and be open to changing your mind when presented with new information. It's not about being right all the time. It's about being open to learning and evolving.
Easier said than done, especially when you're surrounded by people who are already deep down the rabbit hole, convinced that the earth is flat and vaccines cause autism.
You're not wrong. But that's where empathy and understanding come in. We need to find ways to engage in respectful dialogue, even with people who hold views we find abhorrent. We can't just write them off as crazy or stupid. We need to try to understand where they're coming from, what their fears and anxieties are, and why they're so drawn to this kind of divisive rhetoric.
So no more shouting matches on Twitter or unfriending people on Facebook just because they voted for the Orange Menace.
Exactly. We need to resist the urge to retreat into our own echo chambers. We need to break out of our bubbles and engage with people who are different from us. It's not going to be easy and it's not going to be comfortable, but it's essential if we want to heal the divisions in our society.
Sounds like a recipe for a migraine. But hey, if it can save our democracy from the clutches of authoritarianism, maybe it's worth the pain.
It's definitely a challenge, but I think it's a necessary one. We can't just sit back and watch as our country descends into chaos and division. We need to fight for our values, for our freedoms, and for the future of our democracy.
All right, enough with the bleeding heart liberal pep talk. Let's get back to the Wikipedia page. What else does it say about this Trumpism thing?
Well, there's a fascinating section on comparisons to historical figures and movements. A lot of scholars have drawn parallels between Trump and Andrew Jackson, another populist president who is known for his strongman tactics and disdain for elites.
So Trump is basically a modern-day Andrew Jackson. What a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
Are we doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past?
Well, there are definitely similarities. Both men were outsiders who challenged the political establishment and appealed to a sense of grievance among their supporters, and both were willing to bend or break the rules to get their way. They both tapped into this deep-seated suspicion of intellectualism and expertise, positioning themselves as the voice of the common man against the elites.
So this whole strongman thing is nothing new in American politics. It's like a recurring nightmare that we just can't seem to shake.
You could say that. But there's also this really disturbing trend of comparing Trumpism to fascism. It's a controversial topic, but one that we need to grapple with.
Well, hold on. Are we really going there? That seems a bit extreme, don't you think? I mean, Trump was bad, but he wasn't Hitler, right?
Look, I'm not saying Trump was a fascist dictator, but there are some unsettling similarities between his rhetoric and tactics and those of fascist leaders throughout history. The cult of personality, the attacks on the free press, the demonization of opponents, the erosion of democratic norms, it's all pretty fucking alarming.
Okay, now I'm getting a little freaked out. This shit is getting real. Are you saying that America could actually fall into fascism? Like, are we on the brink of becoming some dystopian nightmare?
I'm not saying that's inevitable, but we can't ignore the warning signs. We need to be vigilant in defending our democratic institutions and values. We need to call out bullshit when we see it, hold our leaders accountable, and resist the temptation to normalize authoritarian behavior.
All right, I'm officially spooked. Let's take a break from this heavy shit for a minute. What else is in this Wikipedia page? Any juicy scandals or conspiracy theories?
Oh, there are plenty of those, but maybe we should save those for the next episode.
You're killing me. Fine, we'll leave our listeners hanging for a bit. Make sure you tune in for part 3, where we'll delve into the dark underbelly of Trumpism. We'll unpack the scandals, the conspiracies, and the enduring legacy of this political dumpster fire. It's going to be a wild ride. All right, motherfuckers, welcome back to the final chapter of our deep dive into the abyss of Trumpism. Last time we were teetering on the edge of fascism, comparing the Orange Menace to Hitler and Mussolini. It got pretty fucking dark.
Yeah, we went down a bit of a rabbit hole there, but it's important to confront these uncomfortable truths to understand the historical parallels and potential dangers of this kind of political movement.
All right, Professor Doom and Gloom. Let's not completely lose our shit just yet.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about juicy scandals and conspiracy theories. Spill the beans, man. What kind of bad shit, crazy stuff are we talking about here?
Oh, where do we even begin? The Trump presidency was a 4-year reality show filled with scandals, betrayals, and enough plot twists to make your head spin. Remember the whole Russia investigation, the Mueller report, the impeachment trials.
Oh, yeah, the good old days, when we were constantly glued to our phones, refreshing Twitter every 5 seconds, waiting for the next bombshell to drop. It was exhausting, but also kind of addictive, like watching a slow-motion train wreck.
And then there were the conspiracy theories, QAnon, Pizzagate, the deep state, stolen election. These bizarre and often dangerous ideas spread like wildfire through social media, fueled by Trump's own rhetoric and a willingness among his supporters to believe anything that confirmed their worldview.
It's like they created this alternate reality where facts didn't matter, where any evidence that contradicted their beliefs was dismissed as fake news. or part of some grand conspiracy. It's scary how easily people can be manipulated when they're desperate for simple answers and someone to blame.
And Trump was a master manipulator. He understood how to exploit people's fears and anxieties, how to tap into that primal need for belonging and identity. He gave them a sense of purpose, a feeling like they were part of something bigger than themselves, even if it's something was based on lies and division.
Speaking of batshit crazy,
Yeah.
let's talk about those Trump rallies. It was like a cross between a rock concert and a cult meeting. What the hell was going on there?
Those rallies were carefully orchestrated events designed to create a sense of collective effervescence, a feeling of unity and euphoria among his supporters. The music, the chanting, the over-the-top rhetoric, it was all designed to whip the crowd into a frenzy.
It was like they were all hopped up on some kind of political Red Bull, ready to storm the Capitol or whatever Trump told them to do. It was a powerful display of tribalism and groupthink, and it's not something we should take lightly.
You're right. Those rallies were a potent reminder of how easily people can be swayed by charismatic leaders, especially when they're feeling disenfranchised and angry. It's a dangerous mix, and one that we need to be aware of.
Okay, so we've covered the scandals, the conspiracies, the rallies. It's a lot to process. But after spending all this time digging into the dark underbelly of Trumpism, I'm left with one big question. Why? Why are people so drawn to this kind of bullshit? What is it about this guy and his movement that makes people go so batshit crazy?
It's a complex question, but I think it boils down to this. People are afraid. They're afraid of change. They're afraid of losing their place in the world. They're afraid of the future. Trump offered them simple answers, a scapegoat for their problems, and a vision of a past that never really existed. It was a seductive lie, and one that many people were all too eager to embrace.
So it's nostalgia for a mythical past, a yearning for a time when America was supposedly great, even though that greatness was built on the backs of minorities and the exclusion of anyone who didn't fit the white, Christian, patriarchal ideal.
Exactly. It's a dangerous and destructive ideology, one that we need to actively resist. We need to call out the bullshit, promote critical thinking, and fight for a more inclusive and equitable future.
Well said, my friend, well said. I guess that's about all the time we have for our deep dive into the cesspool of Trumpism. It's been a wild ride, full of twists, turns, and enough WTF moments to last a lifetime.
It's been a pleasure dissecting this political dumpster fire with you. Hopefully our listeners have learned a thing or two along the way.
And if you're still listening after all that, well, you're either a masochist or a true patriot. Either way, we salute you. And remember, folks, don't believe everything you read on Wikipedia, especially when it comes to Trumpism. Stay informed, stay critical, and for the love of all that is holy, stay the fuck away from Twitter. Peace out, motherfuckers.